many people in America fear their government, and the government is being run by too many powerful agencies like the IRS and others. I think it's time the people take the country back through their representative government.
Hey, Mr. Politician, living on that hill, living in that life of luxury on we the people's bill. Don't have a clue how the other half lives, and that is a shame. It's time to stop the tyranny. You keep pushing through your bills. Going for revolution, going for it now. It's time to save our Constitution while we still got the guns in our hands.
Alive at 5, it's Freedom TV. I'm Mary Saunders. I'm standing in for Renee Kimball, who is out today. And I have with me Marc Ricketts, architect of the air with Guildworks. And we have a great show coming up for you today. We're going to talk about some of the events he's worked on. We're going to talk about some art issues and design issues and remedying things on your home. So I look forward to this good audience that Renee has told me so much about, and to interacting you later. You can call in and ask some questions of Marc. So we're really looking forward to that. Okay, and roll tape.
Here is a good example of improvising. In my survival kit, I always keep some plain lead head jigs, different colors, in the kit. Right here, just some moose hair that I found laying on the ground or a rock or someplace. I took that moose hair and I attached it on there with a little bit of thread from a shirt. And this is a fine rainbow killer. Improvising, it really works well. Everything's out here for us. All we got to do is utilize it. Anyhow, that's a fine lure. Anything you pick up. To make these jigs now, another good one. Here's a ptarmigan, or what's left of a ptarmigan. This is the skin of a ptarmigan. You never throw nothing out once you've eaten the contents of what you want. The skin, the hair, the feathers. It's all useful for us. These feathers right here, that makes a beautiful jig or a fly. So save everything. This jig right here could turn into something that looked like this now. Works nice. Everything's out here, we just got to utilize it. You might be kicking around out there, you don't know where you are, you're lost. And you come across an old Coca-Cola can. This happens to be a beer can, would work. Anything would work. I sort of snipped this one out, fashioned it on a stone, and now we've got a metal lure. If you've got a couple of extra hooks with you in your kit, which you should have, and keep this kit with you all the time, and you'll always have it in a survival situation. You've got this going. This thing here turns into this right here. You got a fine fishing lure now. Put these split rings that we talked about go on the bottom and the top of your lure, and you can attach any type of hook you've got to the split ring. You're ready to fish now. For a heavier fish, the newer cans that you might find in some place in the woods are pretty thin, and this will work for small fish like rainbows. But if you get into bigger fish, you might want to take and cut your can. Again, this is the same Coke can. We're getting all this out of one can. And you might want to double it up. Cut it out, double it up, punch a couple of holes in here, put your split rings, put a hook on the end, and you've got a pretty strong lure now. Works real well. You'd be surprised how much you have on yourself at the time. Your rifle or your pistol that you might have with you, pull a bullet. We've got a lot of lead right here. It makes an excellent weight. Tie your string around it, make a nice knot. That'll get your line right down to the bottom where a lot of the fish are. So a pulled bullet works real well. Back to a lure again. Here's a smashed up 223 rifle casing right here with the base removed. You smash it enough times, this base does not want to smash down. It's going to fall off for you. And this base here, again, right around the base here, you'll see a groove. And that's, again, you can tie this onto your line. It's relatively heavy. It's like using a heavy piece of split shot. It works real well. The other part, we use that to make another spoon. If they're biting on a shiny gold color type lure that day, this is going to be the cake. That's what you want to use. So it's pretty easy to improvise if you just think about what you're doing. A fine little ivory hook that one of our students carved when we were out there in a survival camp one day. And you can see how intricate you can make this stuff. Ivory's pretty durable. You can make this out of a nice little hardwood or whatever. And it's not going to be as nice as a commercial hook, but you can catch fish on these things. We've caught quite a few. You're going to want to cut a couple little grooves right up in here so you can attach your line to it, put your bait on the hook, and it's going to act like any other hook. You're going to have to keep a lot of tension on the line, though, to make sure the fish can't get off, because we don't have a proper barb here. If you want to take the time, though, you could cut a barb in it also. People fish like this for thousands of years. It works. Also, porcupines are really easy to find out in the wilderness, and they're easy to run down. You can club them down. It's a good source of food. And their quills, very important. The quills, you can pull these quills out really easily. The best way is an old piece of cloth, like an old shirt that maybe you're not using, you're using it for parts and stuff. If you slap that porcupine, pull that shirt back while it's still alive, pull that shirt back, quills will come out in that shirt. These quills make excellent, real touchy bobbers for fishing. Excellent. And they'll float forever.
We're back with Marc Ricketts, and Marc worked on my house before I knew he was an architect. He has a degree in architecture from Pratt Institute in New York. And without further ado, I will let you tell us some more about how you got started doing tensile fabric structures.
Thanks, Mary. Happy to be here today on Freedom TV. It's been an interesting path to tension structures and fabric structures, and choosing to be an architect of the air instead of just an architect. I thought I was entering architecture school to do sort of contemporary architecture, and found sort of different interests waiting for me there. The studies of geometry and form, abstract studies of form, how one form relates to another, and sort of understanding more possibilities, and really diving into tension structures, tension fabric structures. Things we might know of tension fabric structures is a lot of people know of the Denver airport. They've been there. This is a very, very example of a very, very large tension fabric structures, and that's where most people have experienced these, but they actually have applications on all sorts of different scales. People
have said to me, a tension structure, do you mean a tent? And when I think of a tent, I think of a closed structure, but many of yours are open, and they need to function like sails, taking into account that wind is going to hit them and rain is going to hit them if they're outside. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not doing as, I've done a little bit, and I think there's application for full enclosure, but there's so much application and need for solutions of partial enclosure. We need to be protected from the sun in cases of summer. We need to have protection from the rain to enjoy this outside weather more often that we have in Portland with nice temperatures. We need to just create a space and change the sort of surroundings, but we don't necessarily need to build a building to, maybe have a wedding or do something else. So there's a lot of use of fabric.
So we were going to talk about events. That was one of our topics that we discussed earlier. Maybe we should have some slides come up of events. Now, can we, I don't know if the guys can, here we go. We've got a slide, if you could
This is one this is pretty large scale. You can actually see it from the lower photo. This is for a children's festival in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we created this large piece of art actually with the kids. So it's just a piece of artwork here, but the point was to inspire youth. And it's spanning out of this building. So some of these pieces are several hundred feet in size. And
Great.
What we got to do was we got to take the kids and have them show up and help us spread out these pieces of fabric. And then they released them to the sky and they went up to take these forms.
That's really exciting. I love things that bring the kids in. So
Yeah,
this is more of the same one?
This is more of the same one. It's just very dynamic.
Yeah,
So
different perspective on that. Here
we actually go into functional. This is a festival, Pickathon Music Festival. It actually happens in Southeast Portland, the beginning of August, Happy Valley area. And it's a hot time of year here at the beginning of August, and we need a lot of shade to keep our festival goers cool, and especially the band members on stage. And it's a very large open farm. So actually everything you see here is just directed for the event. This is a farm field.
Wow.
And we turn it into an event field.
Cool.
Here's an aerial view of it, so you can get a picture of what's going on. And some of the spans here are 500 feet by 350 feet of open span fabric structure. About 80,000 square feet of fabric is used.
Whoa! And you
install.
can reuse these pieces, yes?
Yes, many.
So every year you do the same?
Well, every year it grows in scale and scope. And here you get to see then interaction of lights on the fabric at night. That's another nice thing about fabric, is that it doesn't always have to be the same color once you get to night.
Oh, cool. Especially if you have a light color that reflects.
Yeah, and it can also be a backdrop for video, if you notice behind there.
Cool.
So then we take a look on the lower left. We have an indoor installation, just using it to make an event space, but there was a solution here of a wall on the back end. We needed to separate passage-by from the event. So how do you do that without a lot of materials? You can do it just with fabric, a fabric wall.
Cool. Does it affect the acoustics?
Yes, fabric makes a huge difference in the acoustics of a space. This is a fashion show, but again, I'm showing the projection element, really. So.
Oh, cool.
And here we go to a little more personal to people. We're being asked to do a lot of weddings and sort of sacred events and sacred spaces, and make it special, both in the need of, some of them need shade, and others, they just want to, feel that they have a special place together.
Wow, that gives you a good backdrop for photos, doesn't it?
Yes, and this is another wedding. We went from outside to inside, but wedding, and I think this is our last photo on events.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, that was really fun to see. Thanks for the.
Sure, and that's how when I came out of school, it's like, well, here I have an architecture background, and studying architecture, and most architects are building sort of permanence. There's this whole idea of permanence, and I had that idea. But I decided to start my own company, and actually started with kites and built things that were super light and super strong, able to take the wind. But then sort of working my way back into fabrics, I realized, well, I can use some of these same ideas of how I build the kites, because they were sort of architecturally designed kites.
Yeah, and that could lead into some of the things you've done for homes, because you've got to deal with wind and everything else.
The elements, dealing with the elements.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we are ready to do some of those, the slides for the homes.
Right, because then when we're dealing with the elements and able to build very light, we're able to do.
Oh, here we go. Here's some solutions for homes.
We're able to do much more with much less materials. Like here's a deck cover in this area, and it's quite high up. It's a pretty large deck, but we actually are doing it with minimal materials using tension structures, doing more with less, and kind of like the lightweight build, but very strong and light.
Ah, cool.
Just another view of the same piece, opposite sides, and you can sort of get a sense of the rain shedding.
Yeah, yeah, and that the air will shed too.
Yeah,
Another
sense of
one.
shade.
Ah, this looks familiar.
Yeah, you should be familiar with this. You walk in and out of here every day, don't you?
Yeah, that's my house, and I am so pleased with the fact that my stairs are now not slippery enough to break my hip or anyone else's, and the cats really like it when they sneak their heads out there. And there's a unique thing here too, is in that I'm in a historic district, and it has to seem impermanent in order to put it up. So that solved a couple of
Right. Well, a lot of
things.
as long as we're not in a major historic district like a front street with a lot of businesses, and we don't have to. It's not like we're building on here a traditional building. This is a detachable structure. It's really a temporary structure, but it can serve a long-term purpose. It has years and years of life. We, expect these to last and be able to keep the place dry, keep you protected, to give you more use of your outside spaces.
Yeah, and this is the back deck where I'm a exercise instructor, so I want to dry stuff back there. And this is also great because that's another wood structure I wanted to protect. Now maybe, should we talk a little bit about how you design that, how you figure out how you're going to do that in a specific place?
Sure. I mean, it's a design and build aspect and to all of our work. So when I'm working with a client, I look at the actual situation. What is it that they're requesting? What do they need covered? What are the areas? Just to say, these last couple of slides are just shade. So, but again, and then I think that's the end of our home.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But to work with a client and really see what their needs are. Do they need shade? Do they need rain? Do they need wind protection or privacy for their home? What are all the aspects that they need? And then what is the layout of their place? What can I attach to? Is there a tree I can attach to? Or in your place, we're putting up some structure and using the house as part of the structure. And then the design, comes out of that program. So it's really a design science approach that solves a solution, but does it in both a functional way and artistic way. It's it's art, but it's science, and it's architecture is the marriage of the two.
Yeah, I like the places where you can change the tension, and that again comes back to me to be something that you could have children become very involved in understanding the science and the dynamics of air and water and changing the tension and the hardware.
The forces involved, they're real forces, and that was part of what really brought me interest in this work in architectural school, was starting to understand the forces going on in a really comprehensive way and realizing that there's so much design out there of architecture and of structures that aren't really taking into account. They hold up because of their sheer mass or sheer weight, but architecture is using way too much materials from this earth. It's taking almost 50% of our natural resources. So if we can learn to build enclosure lighter, stronger, doing more with less materials, it's just a good turn for humanity.
Yeah, I like the nomadic part too, that you could take something down and take it somewhere else, and I like the economy of it and the biomimicry of it, you know, wings, some of those things look like wings. And as we were talking earlier, I was looking at TED and biomimicry and how nature is really economical in how it builds things and how much we can learn from creatures who, you know, with wings, with shedding, and also with the light things, because she was talking about how you can make a texture, it reflects light, and then you get a color just from that, which is just really...
There's so many things to learn from nature, and this is part of my inspiration in the work, is understanding that nature really builds with tension. We just don't really see it at the scale we live at. But if we look at an atomic scale, there's just particles, and they're floating in space, and they're held together with a tensional force between them. But most of that's empty nothingness, except for that force that's holding it there. And the same is true on our solar system. So we're able to do these very large spans with very low cross-section of materials. There's hardly any material there. And tension it's a tensional element that holds it together.
Yeah, we spoke before of directing water. So the way my thing is now, it's pretty much like a sail. But yeah, you could maybe make, you know, we'll fade into the art part of our discussion more in a little later segment, but also thinking about how to make water cascade in the way it does in other parts of nature with using temporary. So it's going to change. And that is really, that's a wonderful thing about it as well, is that you see these little changes, you see shimmers. And
that excites me about the work in general is that I'm not designing based on my own, oh, I have this vision of doing this like this. It's like, no, I'm meeting a program. You come to me, another client comes and says, I need a solution, you know, for this. And then it's, what does that solution take? How can I use my resources, my materials that I'm used to building with, or find some new materials to mesh with those, and a design concept that will solve that solution in an efficient manner?
Yeah, I was even thinking the post at my house, I'm probably going to wind some jasmine, some tea jasmine up the post, and that will stay pretty evergreen. But I could also change the appearance with some other kind of a vine, because I can take those down, you know, every year. And this, I could take, if I wanted more light, I could take the material down as well. I probably won't, because the sun comes in too strong there. If without that, it kind of functions as an awning.
Right, but that's what you saw. So there's a couple of clients who just want shade. So then they take it down in the winter.
Yeah, and the different fabrics it can filter. So we are going to be talking a little more in another segment. In a minute, we're going to take off and go to Take Our Freedom Back and some things about a glacier. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the art of this and look at some more slides. So
sounds great.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the possibilities for making things flexible. I mean, because that's tension. We talked about tension, but flexibility is part of tension too. As an exercise person, I know how that works. So we're going to go to Take Our Freedom Back and carbon dioxide and glaciers. Rolling.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution. Now an enemy from within would enslave us all again and deprive us of our rights in the Constitution. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time to understand. Restore the Republic. We're losing our freedom in the land. Working from behind the scenes, controlling everything, from the daily news we read to the politicians. And they're pulling our financial strings, more powerful than kings. It's the central bank elites bringing our destruction. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time to make a stand. Restore the Republic. We are the people and we can. Restore the Republic. Pledge our allegiance to the flag. Restore the Republic. We gotta take our freedom back. America, arise. It's time to open up our eyes and march back down the road to freedom. If we look the other way, they'll take our rights away. So we the people must defeat them. Restore the Republic. Printing money till we choke, shoving taxes down our throats, bailing out banks we don't even owe. It's a ruination. They're invading our privacy with high technology, microchip in our ID. It's abomination. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time to make a stand. Restore the Republic. Spread the news across the land. Restore the Republic. Pledge our allegiance to the flag. Restore the Republic. It's time to take our freedom back. It's time to take our freedom back. It's time to take our freedom back.
You've seen those headlines about global warming. The glaciers are melting. We're doomed. That's what several studies supposedly found. But other scientific studies found exactly the opposite. Greenland's glaciers are growing, not melting. The Antarctic ice sheet is getting thicker, not thinner. Did you see any big headlines about that? Why are they trying to scare us? Global warming alarmists claim the glaciers are melting because of carbon dioxide from the fuels we use. Let's force people to cut back, they say. But we depend on those fuels to grow our food, move our children, light up our lives. And as for carbon dioxide, it isn't smog or smoke. It's what we breathe out and plants breathe in. Carbon dioxide, they call it pollution. We call it life.
We're back with Marc Ricketts, and we're talking about some of his installations, and we're going to talk about where some of them have been and some of the different challenges of doing things in different places.
Well, I mean, they've really been a lot all over. Installations more largely in this country, but I've traveled a good bit extensively doing them. Of course, now being located in Portland, I have a lot of local clients, which I really love as well, and they're spread throughout the city as well, from north to south, east, west. But the climate, what the climate has is a lot determining what are the materials. I mean, we're talking about fabric structures and tension structures, but what are the materials that we're using? I mean, done things in Arizona during the summer, and we're talking it's very hot. And it's very dry, and those materials have to take a lot of sun exposure. So we're looking very specifically at that. And there are also potentially, in some of those environments, a lot of wind coming up, like there also is when working in Hawaii. There's a lot of wind.
Okay, so let's go to some more of the slides.
Oh, the next section of slides, I think, is art slides.
Oh, okay. So we've got.
We have mobiles
art
here.
So these are indoors mostly.
These are indoors, and now, is this functional? Well, I mean, it's functional art in the fact that it's kinetic art, and it's filling larger spaces, and it's just sort of bringing in appreciation. And what I like to do with the art is have things that are very gentle in movement, soothing, because I think especially larger public buildings need that. So we've done hospitals, and we can look at the next one if you want.
Yeah, what I liked about that one was it also made it look less sterile.
Right, and this is a children's museum. So here we're entertaining children as they're waiting to get into their museum with these large rotating cloud pieces that they operate, and they get to spin on gears and motors.
Oh, that's great.
Here's a couple other examples of mobiles of different sizes that we've built them for kids' homes. Different offices and lobbies and things. This is really the art side. It's the smaller side of our work in some ways. And just a little ending piece. It's a star that we built for a large community Christmas celebration a couple of years ago. So I thought in this spirit of time, we'd just end with that photo.
Yeah, you and I met when you were designing Earthlight, which is a very intricate structure that was going to be designed to go to different places where there'd been disasters, and that was really a wonderful structure. It reminded me of the Denver airport, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But so let's talk some more about the art aspects and also kids. So have you done a lot of projects with kids involved?
Done a lot of projects through the years, not so many recently, but a lot with kids and kites and art, this whole thing. And a lot of the art has gone into places with kids, how to entertain kids, how that we've built these giant spirals in children's hospitals and stuff that the kids can come up and play with.
Oh, nice.
Learn about a different geometry and how that moves around in the room, other than just blocks. It's to put different shapes in front of them, let their mind grow and get interested in those shapes.
Wow, that's, yeah, I really like the idea of helping to enliven things. Sometimes our indoor spaces, well, we need to bring a little bit of
life into them. It's life, even if it's
movement.
Not completely. It's got a life of its own. The mobile has a beautiful life on its own, and it has a way you can interact with it. You can sit there and blow wind, to a mobile that's 8 feet away in your home that we build, and it will just lightly move around. And there's some opportunity coming up actually for people in this region to come and see the mobiles at our studio, because we're forming an arts guild. It's kind of Guildworks is the name of the company, but I have so many friends and associates in the area who are into arts. In fact, we share our studio, I don't know if you know this, with another company, M. Horton. They're a sewing design company, and they do costumings and clothing. They also teach people to sew even, and have classes and workshops for people who want to sew.
Oh, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not very good at it. It really is appealing to me. And a lot of people are talking about coming back to doing your own skills like that.
And also appreciating those skills, and in the holiday time. So we're starting this arts guild because people appreciate to find something that's locally made. So we're not paying shipping on it. It's supporting it's all the funds for it staying in the local economy, and it's an outside the box sort of thinking. So we're forming this guild together, and we're going to try our first sale out coming up the 19th and 20th at our studio. So we're calling it PDX Art Guild, and we've launched a little build a website for it. But it's a chance for people to come and even just see the space that we work in and see some of the projects, learn about whether they just want to learn or, you know, they want to come get a gift or whatever.
Yeah, see how all that, I know that it was very involved, all the seaming and all of that on the things that you made for me. And you're also in a very vital part of town. Tell me where the studio is again.
The studio's on the corner of 9th and Washington, and they can always call us to get exact directions, or we can head them to the website. There'll be a web link there from our site, and for them to pull up a little map. But it's really close to Belmont and Morrison, so people can come right over the Morrison Bridge. If they're coming from the west side, they can come down MLK, you know, or Sandy and get to us. We're very conveniently located right there.
Yeah, that's just a hotbed of activity down in that neighborhood. It's a very exciting neighborhood, and I visited your studio a couple of times, and it was really fascinating to see all the some of the things that we saw slides of you'll have that people can kind of play with, I would imagine.
Different models and mobiles and kites and examples of fabrics. They can feel fabrics. They can get the sense and feel of these things there and see some of our working environment and the way we change it, both from the studio is very interesting because we've set it up both to be a functioning workshop and to be a functioning sort of hosting space. So how does it have a temporary fabric structure that comes and goes depending on, does it need a backdrop or does it need to be clear for the workshop? And they'll see sort of the meld of those two when they come by.
That just, I really would love to have some kind of activity down in that neighborhood. It's such an attractive place. And so let's talk some more about the other manipulable parts of what you do. So the hardware, I mean, that's part of the art, but it's also part of the difference and the changing and the novelty, which to me is a big deal with making art. And so will you have some hardware there for people to play with?
Of course, yeah, the materials that we build with, showing the different materials. I mean, and it depends, you know, whether it's a temporary material or a permanent one. In the case of yours, we're using, you know, stainless steel cable and then turnbuckles to tighten the tension. And we need to be able to tension over time because these materials, even if it's stainless steel or a spectrofiber, which is another man-made fiber, these are things that stretch over time, and the fabric stretches, so we got to keep tensioning it over time and adjusting it for that. Just the same way, even buildings that are wood and stuff shrink and expand and will cause problems of things cracking apart. We see it in concrete, we see it other ways. Well, tension's a little more flexible, so it's nice. It won't crack apart, but we just need to pay attention to that maintenance of it.
Yeah, I like the experimental sort of nature of it, so that you know, maintenance is a big thing with anything that you do that you want to have remain, you know, doing the same function. And also, you know, for kids, again, back to the kid angle, you know, a lot of times our kids don't get accustomed to thinking about the maintenance aspect of things. You know, they get to often go to school and have the janitors fix things and clean things and all of that. Whereas if there are parts to change and ways to tinker with things.
Right, or ones that have to come up and down, and there's a seasonal, you know, putting this thing up and then having it and then bringing it down and how to put it away and experimenting with those things. They don't have to take every, you know, moment of your life, but if we learn to work with these sort of systems easily, then it can provide so much more with sort of a little bit of interaction, and it's a teaching interaction, both for kids and adults. I think it's good.
Yeah, I noticed that somebody was visiting me and some leaves, fall leaves, fell on the fabric, and they were looking up at it, and they really liked the way it was making more of a. You could just see the outline, the shading, and that was, you know, that was a nice thing for maintenance too. Is that because it light comes through, I can see kind of what's going on with it. And also the other thing that we talked about with it was noticing where the water comes. So for water saving, I can put, a receptacle somewhere where it sheds, and we'll be kind of observing how that goes. And also, the way the post tilts, so that's designed to be part of the tensioning and the use of the cedar. Well, in this climate.
The post, it's like we think of a support post, and the first thing that will draw into people's minds is to just, something that's upright. But if you notice on pretty much all of my structures, the posts are leaning out at an angle. Well, it's because they're holding back this tensional force coming across here. Here's this fabric, and the post is leaning here, holding the fabric, and the cable coming to the ground. So the post has to be, it's kind of the equation zone. It's midway between the cable that's going to really take that force into the ground and the piece coming across. So the structure visually teaches something about the way it's built. If you look at the structure, it's a visual teaching. It's not hiding its actual physical forces.
We need to go to Bandon, Boston, and we'll be back after that for your questions. So think about your questions and call in if you have something you want to ask Mar. Thank you.
Well, I'm just an entrepreneur, and I'm not looking for a handout. I'm just looking for a chance.
I'm Jeff Rose of the Institute for Justice, and I'm here with our client, Errol Tyler, and we're in front of the Constitution to talk about the Constitution. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees every American the right to earn an honest living, free from unreasonable government interference. Meet Errol Tyler. He's been trying for years to realize his American dream, opening an amphibious vehicle tour service in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Nautical Tours.
Well, Nautical Tours will depart from Kendall Square, Cambridge, and we will offer 1.5-hour tours that compass the cities of Cambridge and Boston. Nautical Tours will be conducting our sightseeing tours on a vessel known as a Hydroterror. Now, the Hydroterror is the only U.S. Coast Guard safety-approved vehicle of its kind on the market today. Here we are on the Charles River, and behind me is the Longfellow Bridge, the bridge that the city of Boston states we cannot cross to come into the city.
Boston won't let Errol into the city without a sightseeing license, which the city stopped issuing in 1995 when the Big Dig started. But the Big Dig was over years ago.
Billions over budget, years in the making, the most expensive public works project in American history officially opened this morning in Boston.
The mayor cut the ribbon in January 2003, but didn't lift the ban on new sightseeing licenses.
We are puzzled as to why Boston does not want to let us in the city.
Boston appears to be keeping entrepreneurs like Errol out of business to protect a 7-company cartel that owns all the licenses.
Nautical Tours has been trying to seek and secure all permits and license for 7 years, and to this day we still do not have them.
The constitutional right to earn an honest living doesn't allow Boston to keep Errol out of business just to make a cartel of favored companies better off. Errol's suit is about the Privileges or Immunities Clause, the 14th Amendment's repository of liberty, including the right to earn an honest living.
The Privileges or Immunities Clause was at the very heart of the 14th Amendment. It essentially says the state shall not make statutes that violate the basic rights of citizens of the United States.
The economy is littered with irrational licensing and petty cartels because courts don't faithfully enforce the Privileges or Immunities Clause. This traces back to a notorious 1873 Supreme Court decision called the Slaughterhouse Cases.
Well, 5 years after the 14th Amendment was enacted, the Supreme Court essentially gutted the Privileges or Immunities Clause from the 14th Amendment, and it has really, with one exception, never been heard from again.
One aspect of the Privileges or Immunities Clause that remains in force are the rights to travel and access navigable waterways, which is what Nautical Tours wants to do. This case is an opportunity for the courts to begin reviving the Privileges or Immunities Clause and repudiate the slaughterhouse cases.
There is now a scholarly consensus that the slaughterhouse cases interpreted the Privileges or Immunities Clause incorrectly.
By vindicating the constitutional right to earn an honest living, Errol and the Institute for Justice will advance economic liberty for entrepreneurs across the country.
Well, Nautical Tours is not looking for a bailout. We're just simply looking for a chance.
Here we are back, and in the break we were talking a little bit about art and function and how those two interact.
Well, they do completely, and I think you see it in the slides of the work, especially the functional work, that a lot of people respond, emotionally, like, oh, these are such beautiful works. Well, but they're functional works. To me, they've got to be both, and I really have this belief that everything we live with can be art, but I also have a belief that everything we live with needs to be functional. Some art is good to just be appreciated, and its function is the appreciation and the learning from the art style of it or what it's teaching. But as far as most of the things in your life are more functional things, and I think we can come about them with a lot of art, but coming from function can show how to build art.
Yeah, I think of feng shui. So feng shui will direct you to do certain things, or even a sculpture that moves with air shows you what's going on with the air, say, in your structure. So I have an old structure that I live in, and they're very hard to seal. So, but, the other part of that is now homes are being built that are sealed so well that then air quality becomes an issue, and whether the air is changing enough and that sort of thing. So that must be, something of a consideration for some of the things that you do, figuring out, directing the eye, say, in a performance or in a building that has a function. And we have a phone call I am hearing here, so we're gonna, we lost him, it looks like, so we'll just...
hopefully they call back. So.
It looks like we have another phone call, so let's try again. Caller? Do we have a caller? I'm not hearing it, but we'll see. So, yeah, I guess we lost the call. Must have been a cell phone. I lose mine. Or wait, is this coming on?
Hello?
Ah, there's somebody.
Hello?
Yes. I have a question regarding the material that's used for the outdoor structures. How long-lasting is that? Do UVs affect it, and does it get algae buildup at all? Or?
That's a great question. There's many different materials we use, and it varies case to case. Again, this is the same design science approach. It's what is the need of the person who the individual who's coming with the program, and to be built. Do you need rain, shade protection? And then there's a variety of different materials we can look at depending on what sort of lifespan do you want out of the structure. Most of the things we put outside will last at least 5 to 10 years, but I also have fabrics that will last 30 years. It's a question of what's the longevity of the whole project to you, and what's the budget you want to put into that project.
And we have another phone call. So let's take our next phone call. Are we getting somebody on the line? Question for Marc Ricketts?
Hello?
Ah, here we go. Yes, caller?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Marc.
Hello?
Hi, I was just wondering what your artistic influences are.
My artistic influences, wow, that's a good question. I have so many. A lot of artistic influences are coming from nature, the nature of design, the nature of form and structure. And so there's a lot of influence coming there. Then influence coming from different architects through history, from Antonio Gaudi to Buckminster Fuller and his design science revolution. to different artists and painters and sculptors who have built beautiful things. So it's really all over the place. I appreciate so many things and take them in and let that guide my learning into making my art and science mix.
Thank you, caller. Thanks for the question.
Yes, that was a great one. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really a good one. Because,
I could talk about that for so long.
Oh, Fullerines. Oh, boy. Buckminster Fuller, he was so inspiring. We have another phone call. So, caller, you're on the air with a question for Marc Ricketts.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Mark, when was it that you found out that you were autistic?
Autistic? I don't know that I've ever been defined totally as that. I mean, I have a very diverse background and ability. Artistic or autistic, I think, was the question that confused me there. But I have different abilities than a lot of architects in training, and it just sort of came to me through my studies that I could apply things to tension structures and really have an extreme understanding of the forces involved.
Thank you, caller. Yeah, that's artistic or autistic. You know, a lot of times men in this culture actually have to be pretty, you know, it's like a boy named Sue to get through schooling and still allow their creative sides to be going. How was that for you?
Well, it was definitely a challenge in the first part of growing up, but I always just sort of, for the most part, tried to go with what I felt was true to me, you know, and true in what I wanted to study and how I wanted to be in the world. So it's just all an exploration. I think each individual has to find it on their own.
So at Pratt, it probably wasn't a problem. But how about going back further than there? Growing up, what kind of schools did you go to?
I went to public school, so there's the challenges of public school and existing within that system and then finding what interests me and exploring that. I was still lucky to have some really good teachers in both theater and in some architecture, and then went to work for an architectural office in my teenage years and learned a lot there, and also for a theater. So different people have affected my life all along, and find what truly inspires me, that art and that science mix that truly inspired me. And that was what I kept coming back to, that I was interested in science and I was interested in art and interested in theater. And so all these interests, and then for a while it was like, well, which way do I go? Do I go off and work in the theater, or do I go into art, or do I go into architecture or into engineering? And so all these fields were interesting me, and it's very interesting now to sort of look back on what's happened is I've kind of incorporated all of those different fields that I was interested in early on, and thinking they were totally different divergent lines, like, oh, do I go to school for this or that or this or that? Well, I went to school for architecture, but still what I'm doing is theater, you know, and what I'm doing is engineering, and what I'm doing is art, and what I'm doing is architecture. It's all of those in one, and it depends on the job which one is more relevant or important.
Wow, that's a pretty complicated story, and it's not just maybe gender-based. I think creatives often have a very difficult time in many school situations, and you have to learn maybe to be pretty adept socially to wiggle around that. I mean, unless you have an exceptionally benign culture or supportive culture. And I mean, I just find that a very interesting question, because schooling is really good, I found in my own experience, for the kids who want to be math stars or science stars. it can be a bigger problem for other kids.
Right, but I really found it, and it definitely was more of an issue in the high school schooling, but going off into college and finding a couple professor mentors who I really believed in, who let me see possibilities that weren't standardly being seen out there, that there's so many different ways to do things. I mean, it's really infinite.
Oh, we've got one more phone call. This will have to be fast, it looks like. Caller?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, I was wondering, I was thinking about getting a tattoo on my balls.
They don't get
irrelevant.
The point of the program.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that topic of finding your way and how you can maintain a feeling of competence. Even when the culture sort of pushes you around the way it would push around an air sculpture.
Right, or how to, I mean, the other bigger challenge in my life has been, well, how do you take something that's artistic, and an artistic, functional artistic vision, and turn that into a business in this world? So, I mean, you've got to survive in the world of business, but I wasn't even taught in business, so I had to sort of learn that on my own and get guidance and help, and manage to survive doing something that hasn't really been done. So that's another interesting thing coming from sort of this background or this wanting to bring about new change. It's like something new hasn't been done, and then doing it not coming from a business background, because business necessarily doesn't always want to do new. It wants to do what's succeeded. So
yeah, it's that balancing risk versus payoff and the tedium of getting to do what you want to do that's really exciting. So you'll always have those tedious parts, very carefully doing the seam, which I guess if you're pretty zen.
Yeah, I really enjoy the qualities of our craftsmanship. I mean, that was part of what made the name of the company Guildworks. Is I wanted to go back to what the guilds stood for. Is they stood for, well, we know there's a sense of quality and craft in this object, that fine craft quality. That's what the guild stood for, and they created work out of that. So combine those two into the word, and so that even if they look at our stuff and says, well, that's not an old style. No, it's not at all, which you might think of a guild as an older style. But it's creating that work, and it gives the opportunity also for other people to come into the company as they have in different times. There's other designers that work with us and go off and do projects with the resources of the company, not just me. So it allows for that.
Yeah, we had to get the guy to trim the trees so they wouldn't, it wouldn't interfere. Well, we are about at the end of our time. Here comes the music. That's the big cue. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed our talk.
So did I, Mary. It was great.
Really good. Thanks, Mar.
Thank you.
I cry for my country, for the pain that it's been through. She's been made to suffer for the profit of a few. Storm clouds are forming, winds of change now touch our shores. Our hear forefathers are crying as the dream's been cruised. America, I show my love for thee with strength and loyalty. America, I show